Right now, on a farm you've never heard of, an animal is watching a stranger walk through the gate. She's never met this person before, but she already knows something about them. Not their name, not their job, but whether they're safe. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. If that same stranger comes back in 6 months, a year, even 3 years later, she'll remember them. Not vaguely, not "this feels familiar." She will recognize that exact face, that exact walk, that exact voice, the way you'd recognize an old friend at an airport. For decades, scientists assumed farm animals lived entirely in the present. No memory of the past, no real understanding of who's who, just instinct running on a loop. They were wrong. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this discovery is changing everything we thought we knew about the animals we've spent 10,000 years living beside and barely bothered to understand. Welcome to Barn Mind. Here's what you're about to discover. You're going to learn how a pig's brain, an organ most people assume is built for one thing, finding food, is actually wired with a social memory system that rivals dogs, and in some tests even outperforms 3-year-old human children. You're going to see the real experiment where researchers proved pigs can tell friendly humans from hostile ones without ever being told which was which. You're going to hear about the farmers who swear their pigs greet certain visitors differently than others, and why science now says they might be right. And at the very end, I'm going to show you the discovery that made even the researchers who study this go quiet in the lab the moment they realized pigs weren't just remembering humans. They were forming opinions about them. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the animal that started this whole investigation. Not a lab pig in a white-tiled room. A backyard pig named Priscilla. In the early 2000s, a woman in the American South adopted a pig she'd rescued as a piglet. She named her Priscilla. For the first year, Priscilla did what pigs do. She rooted around the yard, she napped in the sun, she learned the sound of the back door, but then something strange started happening. Every time a particular neighbor walked past the fence, a man who'd once yelled at her for getting into his garden, she didn't just notice him. She reacted, immediately, every single time, weeks apart, months apart. It didn't matter how long the gap was. Meanwhile, a different neighbor, one who used to sneak her apple slices, got the opposite response. Ears forward, tail wagging. A low, happy grunt her owner came to recognize as pure excitement. Here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't a trained behavior. Nobody taught Priscilla to sort people into categories. She did it on her own, based on a handful of brief encounters, months apart, with no reminders in between. Stories like this started reaching animal behaviorists throughout the 2000s and 2010s. Normally, a farmer's anecdote wouldn't be enough to change scientific opinion. But this pattern kept repeating. Different farms, different countries, different pigs. Always the same core behavior, long-term memory of specific individual humans tied to emotion. So researchers did what researchers do. They stopped listening to stories and they built an experiment. But here's where everything changes. Here's the setup. Researchers studying pig cognition, building on decades of animal behavior science from institutions across Europe and North America, designed something called a human handler discrimination test. The idea was simple but brutal in what it revealed. Two people would interact with the same pig repeatedly over several sessions. One person would always be gentle. Calm voice, soft touch, occasionally offering food. The other person would be neutral or mildly unpleasant. Brief, unfriendly contact, no cruelty, just cold. Then came the real test. The pigs were placed in a space where both people stood at a distance, silent, motionless. No cues, no voices, no food in sight. Which human would the pig choose to approach? Time after time, the pigs moved toward the person who had treated them kindly and avoided the one who hadn't, even when the unpleasant person stood completely still and gave no signal at all. Let that sink in for a second. The pigs weren't reacting to a tone of voice or body language or a smell of food. They were recalling an experience from a previous encounter, attaching an emotional value to a specific person and using that memory to make a decision in the present. That's not instinct. That's not a reflex. That's a memory of who someone is to you. And here's what most people miss about this discovery. It didn't just show that pigs remember faces. It showed they remember relationships. Psychologists have a name for this kind of memory in humans. It's called episodic-like memory, the ability to recall not just facts, but specific events, tied to time, place, and emotion. For years, scientists debated whether any non-primate animal truly had it. Pigs kept proving they did. But a memory test in a controlled pen only tells you so much. The real question was bigger. If pigs remember individual humans, how are they actually doing it? What's happening inside that surprisingly large brain? Scientists didn't expect what they'd find next. A pig's brain isn't small. Relative to body size, it's remarkably close to a dog's, and pigs consistently outperform dogs on certain cognitive tasks, including ones involving memory, problem-solving, and understanding cause and effect. But size alone doesn't explain memory like this. What matters is structure, and pigs have a highly developed hippocampus, the brain region responsible for forming and storing long-term memories, including memories of individuals. Here's an easy way to picture it. Every time a pig meets a human, their brain isn't just recording that a person happened. It's building something closer to a file. Face, voice, smell, behavior, outcome. Was I safe? Was I fed? Was I hurt? That file gets stored. And unlike a lot of animal memory, which fades fast, this one sticks. Research on pig cognition has documented individual recognition of both other pigs and humans, lasting many months after just a handful of encounters. Think about how unusual that actually is. Most farm animals interact with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people over a lifetime. Vets, handlers, visitors, family members. A memory system that couldn't filter and file that information efficiently would be overwhelmed almost immediately. But that's exactly why this trait likely evolved in the first place. In the wild boar, the ancestors of the domestic pig, live in complex social groups. Survival depends on knowing exactly who's a threat, who's family, and who's safe to be near. That social memory system didn't disappear when pigs were domesticated. It just got pointed at us. Which means every time a pig looks at a human and seems to just know something about them, that's not a coincidence. That's 10,000 years of evolutionary memory still running. But here's where the story stops being about biology and starts being about something much harder to explain. Quick pause, because what's coming next might be the most surprising part of this whole video, and I don't want you to miss it. If you're the kind of person who thinks farm animals are smarter and more emotional than most people give them credit for, hit like right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about this stuff. And if you've got a story about an animal that remembered you, a pig, a cow, a horse, anything, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the best moments on this channel started as a comment someone left just like this. Now back to the story, because we're about to find out this isn't just about memory, it's about judgment. Here's a question that sounds simple, but isn't. How does a pig even recognize a specific human face in the first place? We don't smell the same every day. We change clothes. Some days we're wearing hats, sunglasses, raincoats. So what exactly is the pig locking onto? Researchers studying facial and individual recognition in pigs have found something remarkable. Pigs don't rely on just one sense to identify a person. They combine several at once. Visual details like height, gait, and posture, voice tone and pitch, and scent, which for a pig, an animal with one of the most sensitive noses in the animal kingdom, carries an enormous amount of identifying information. It's a kind of biological facial recognition software, except it's not just checking whether something is a face, it's cross-referencing sight, sound, and smell simultaneously, then matching it against stored memory. And this is where it gets almost unsettling in the best way. In several documented cases, pigs have shown they can distinguish between two humans wearing near-identical clothing. Same overalls, same boots, same hat, based purely on subtle differences in movement and voice. Two strangers who looked like twins to the human eye, not to the pig. But here's the detail that changes how you should think about every pig you've ever met, even briefly. That recognition isn't neutral. It comes preloaded with a judgment. Remember the handler experiment? The pigs didn't just recognize the kind person and the cold person. They treated them like fundamentally different categories of being. Approach, avoid, trust, guard. Which means, somewhere in that barn, right now, there's a pig quietly keeping a mental record of every person who's ever walked through, sorted, filed, and remembered, long after the humans involved have completely forgotten the encounter ever happened. We like to think of memory as something that makes us special, something that separates humans from, quote, the animals. But here's where everything changes. Once you understand that pigs remember people, not just as shapes that bring food, but as individuals with histories attached, it forces an uncomfortable question. If an animal can remember kindness, it can also remember the absence of it. This is part of why animal behavior researchers have increasingly pushed for a rethink of how pigs are handled in agricultural and research settings, not out of sentimentality, but because the science is now undeniable. Chronic stress, harsh handling, and repeated negative encounters don't just cause short-term fear in pigs. They get stored, filed away, remembered, and the opposite is true too. Calm, consistent, low-stress handling has been shown to measurably improve welfare outcomes, reduce stress hormones, and even influence how pigs interact with humans for the rest of their lives. In other words, every interaction a human has with a pig isn't a one-time event that disappears the moment it's over. It becomes part of who that pig understands you to be, permanently. There's something almost humbling about that. For thousands of years, we've treated pigs as background animals. Useful, simple, replaceable. And this whole time, at least some of them have been watching us just as closely as we've ever watched them, quietly deciding, based on the evidence we gave them, whether we were someone worth trusting. That's not a cute farm fact, that's a mirror. And it's the reason this next part isn't just the biggest reveal of the video. It's the one that changed how the scientists who discovered it think about every animal on a farm. Here's the detail that made researchers pause. It's not just that pigs remember individual humans for months, sometimes years. It's that they appear to update those memories over time, adjusting their trust in a specific person based on new experiences. The same way you might slowly warm up to someone or slowly grow wary of them. That's not a fixed instinct, that's something closer to a relationship. A pig doesn't just remember that you exist, it remembers how you made it feel, and it's still deciding, every time you walk through that gate, whether today changes the story. I think about Priscilla a lot, a backyard pig who never read a research paper, never sat in a lab, who simply lived her life the way pigs have lived for 10,000 years. Watching, remembering, deciding who deserved her trust. We spent so long assuming animals like her were running on instinct alone. Simple, forgettable, interchangeable. But somewhere on a farm right now, an animal is watching someone walk through a gate, and she already knows exactly who they are to her. Maybe the real discovery here isn't about pigs at all. Maybe it's about how much we still don't know about the animals we've decided we already understand. Have you ever seen a farm animal do something that completely changed how you viewed them? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. If this video changed the way you think about pigs, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.